Hello, and welcome to the DrivingMaul show here on Monday evening at 8 p.m. That's right, you can get your rugby fix at 8 p.m. every single Monday, every single week, 52 weeks a year. You know, we even do pre-recorded shows for Christmas days and New Year's Day. So hey, you can always rely on us. We're here for you all the year round. And we did have Stephen to join us, but he's just gone and dropped off. So I don't know where he's gone. As you can see, folks, yes, we are part of the one of these remote working kind of crowds. We don't have our own studios and offices. We do it. We've been working from home for years. So yes, we're used to it. And Boa joins me. How are you doing, sir?
Very well. Like I said, the most look forward to time of my week is being on the show. Great weekend of rugby. Really excited. Great to be back. And nice to see you, Paul. And wherever you are, folks joining us, I hope you had a good weekend.
Oh, see, he's such a gentleman. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Hope you enjoyed your rugby. Hope you had a good weekend. Yeah, let's get on. No, he's like, oh, he's welcoming you all in. Oh, he's such a gent. And another gentleman to join the show is Stephen Harris. How you doing, sir?
Eventually made it, Paul Mario. Nā mahare mai ki te wiki o te reo Māori. Paul Mario, Paul Rawa ko Boa. Great to be on the show.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I struggle just saying names, so there's no chance you're going to get that out of me. I'm afraid I will. I do need to learn though.
I just thought being Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori Language Week would be a good thing to throw in.
No, I love it personally, and it's. But anyone who's seen the counties video, you'll see that I'm a bit like the guy in that one who's the European guy who likes to make an effort, who likes to try, but yes, makes a ham fist of it for the first 20 times. But he did well in the end. He did well in the end. And Steve, friend of yours.
Paul, I was about to say somewhere in the year 2050 that the Australian NRL commentators will be able to say Pacific Island and Māori names. So I'm hoping that I'll still be alive when the next happens.
Okay, because look, they're a new. That's a new part of the whole rugby league culture. Clearly, is these names.
Yeah, a bit of awareness and education, and Steve. Speaking of Te Reo Māori Language Week, I think there's certainly a heightened sense of awareness and just bumping into people on a daily basis in colloquial terms. I think there is a real sense of awareness and people wanting to express themselves in Te Reo, which is a fantastic thing to see. And I think it's starting to creep into daily life in not so much what I would call intentionally wanting to go and do it, but it's starting to become second nature, which is, a great sign of seeing how Te Reo is becoming part and parcel of New Zealand lifestyle, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and listen, even the code that we're celebrating or talking about this evening, footy paro or rugby, as we know it, we know that there's a real a theme behind some of the provincial teams at the moment. I know Paul and I up in Whangarei yesterday, we heard the Northland Kauri girls singing a waiata after they came off the paddock and celebrated. Apparently the Northland Taniwha men did the same thing. So yeah, they're being immersed in culture, and it's a good thing. Anything that brings people and teams together has got to be a good thing.
Yep, that's this pass. That's the Northland one. Because folks, yes, we did get around a bit. So that's there's the I think that's the Waikato one. Got the North Harbour one, and folks, which one do you think this one is? Go on then, Stephen. You know what it is. Tell everybody.
I was hoping we'd get somebody from the live chat to come on and
let us know who that is. No, they've not yet. Not yet. One of the things here, folks, is what you might notice is that we pull up things from the live chat and talk about them, but there's a delay. There's about a 20-second delay between us talking and the live chat happening. And so it's a bit hard doing that. So that's why we've never run a quiz with the live chat, because it would be funny with waiting 20 seconds for all the answers. But anyway, yes, That's Counties Manukau. Got the little badge there on the on the crest on that one, which is cool to see. But Boa, you were saying that actually those Tasman, Aaron, really, you were saying that these colours are also the same for your club side, and the story behind it.
Yeah, well, the Manukau Rowers, based in obviously South Auckland, the heart of South Auckland, Viscount Street in Mangere, our home being Williams Park. The colour scheme is there's a strong correlation which is shared with Counties Manukau. Now I'm not entirely there's a few different variations of the story behind the rover, which is a bird, and the color scheme. This gets related after a few beers at socials whenever the premiers play. So there's about 6 different versions. So I can't really put my finger on which the correct version of the story is. But there you go. Manukau Rovers do share the same colors as Counties Manukau in the Mitre 10.
There we go. And talking of Mitre 10, so as you can see, look, I've shown you my media passes. I got a 7 games out this weekend across the Mitre 10 and the Farah Palmer Cup, seeing 11 out of the 14 provinces there. So yeah, just showing off a little bit. But unfortunately, we can see Simon's not happy because he won't be able to go to the game this weekend because apparently the government has kept the levels the same. Now, I'll be honest. After 7 games in 3 days, I've just slept today, so I've got no idea what the government has said about levels, to be honest. But what we've seen basically in the games in round 1 is that people can. There are small crowds at the stadiums, depending on the size of the stadium and the layout. It depends on how many they can actually get in because it's groups of 100. And so what we've seen in some stadiums is that they'll have one entrance for 100 people, another entrance for another 100 people. So if you've only got one entrance to your stadium, you can only have 100 people. If you've got 10 entrances, and you can keep people apart inside, then you can have more, which is what we've seen. Because Stephen, as we were walking around the Northland one, there's lots of barriers to guide people in the right direction, aren't there?
Well, I was going to say, when I drove to Whangarei, I had 4 entrances to my vehicle, so but I was lucky enough to have only one person jump in the car. But you did right, Paul. But you know what? Being at a game, you could actually still hear those people shouting out really loud, and even some of the live games you were watching, you just knew that there were some local supporters there, and they were making as much noise as they can.
Yeah, and while Simon says, the Rotary is saying it's not allowing anyone in, that's, well, I say that seems to be different to the standard seems to be that it's sponsors and members only. So if you're not a member or a sponsor, you're not going to get in. So yeah, it's kind of invite only for that. And a bit like we've seen in Australia where they've had ballots for their members to allow tickets into some of the Super Rugby games. Luckily, we got through most of the Super Rugby games. We didn't have to do that. And we could have full crowds. But look, it's a shame that we have to do it. But it's as Aaron Smith made the point during your interview with him at the weekend. Look, it's the times we're in, and we just look, it's not just here; it's around the world, and we have to make the best of the situation, really. So yes, talking of actually, Stephen, let's have a quick chat about your interview with Aaron Smith, because folks, you can watch that interview on our Facebook page, New Zealand Sports Radio. He's one of 19 post-match interviews that we did this weekend that's available on there. So you had a good chat with Aaron Smith. He was very very giving you his time, wasn't he?
Very, very much so. And given that he came in a good half hour after the players had gone into the tunnel, done the ones that had done their media commitments, he stayed out for about another 20-25 minutes doing his own personal training. So I was a bit apprehensive about approaching him. He worked up a bit of a sweat, but yeah, he was fantastic. he gave me a good 5 minutes or so. And listen, really, really laid back. And yeah, we spoke about not just about the game. He knew exactly when he last played for Manawatu, but like I say, you'll have to watch that interview to see the rest of that conversation that we had. But yeah, really spoke really, really frank. A good dude.
Yeah, and so, Boa, and obviously, I've spent my entire time in stadium seeing it from that point of view. How have the games looked on TV, and how's been the kind of the atmosphere you get across the TV, the coverage that Sky's been providing?
Look, when I was watching some of the Super Rugby games initially, it actually did feel a little bit weird. It felt weird because it kind of felt like you were playing in a ghost town. I remember probably 10, maybe 11 years ago, watching a sevens tournament, which was held in Durban, and it was a similar sort of situation. I think they've had some, situations or issues in Durban, and there's hardly anyone in the stadium. Fast forward about 11, 12 years, and we're in this situation which they call the new normal. It is weird. I've been watching a lot of sport coming in from Europe, i.e. the football. So I'm sort of getting used to it. It does seem weird. And also, I think it's probably going to have an impact on the performance of the players as well, because, when you don't have a big crowd, and if you've been used to playing in stadiums where it's, full capacity, there's lots of noise, and it's a different feel. But what I do have to say is it seemingly has had no impact on the performance. And from a spectator's point of view, when you're actually watching really high quality, high class rugby, where there's hardly any errors, free flowing rugby, side to side, all that sort of gets lost, and it's secondary, and your focus is high quality of rugby. So from a spectator point of view, it's really not making too much of a difference. Initially, I have to admit though, looking at some of those empty stands was somewhat apprehensive, but the quality of the rugby has more than made up for the missing crowds.
And actually, I guess from a TV point of view, I mean, if we think about back to Waikato last year, the cameras are in the main stand. Okay, folks, at FMG Stadium, and that's the side they commentate from. And Waikato only opened that stand up for fans last year. They didn't open up the second stand on the other side, so you saw an empty stadium for Waikato games last year. But you could hear the crowd in the main stadium, which I guess is the difference, is the sound rather than necessarily the view. Because I think we're used to seeing pretty empty stadiums for a lot of these Mitre 10 Cup games. Anyway, to be honest, really. It's interesting in the live chat there, people saying about some upsets and things this weekend. Actually, before I get onto that, Ben Darwin, the guy behind Gainline Analytics, and we had an interview with his business partner in that one. It was one of our long talks. You can go check that out on New Zealand Sports Radio Facebook page, or you can also listen to that as our podcast. Just search New Zealand Sports Radio on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcatcher. But one of the things that he mentioned about when doing research and stats on the NRL, when they had no fans, I think the NRL and also the perhaps might be Super Rugby. I think it's the NRL though. He said that the home advantage level had dropped without crowds. There wasn't as much home advantage. There was still a home advantage, but also I think there was a thing about it, once teams got behind, they were in real trouble. Teams couldn't raise themselves to sort of come back, which was interesting. That's actually the impact of not having fans and not having the atmosphere there. Is actually sometimes once a team. So we had quite a lot of blowouts in the early rounds of the NRL, and compared to how we normally get. But yeah, once teams are down, they tend to stay down. Stephen, you seem to be a bit sceptical there with your view.
Yeah, that's true. Unless you're going to Invercargill on a very wet day in your very first game of the Mitre 10 Cup, because I reckon they ordered in those conditions and they were absolutely perfect. See, that was a good segue into that theory, which kind of gets blown out the window.
Yes, plenty of home advantage if you get the weather there. It's supposed to be a summer tournament this year. Look, it's later in the year. We're not supposed to be having wet games. This is one of my key questions during all my pre-season interviews with the head coaches was how's the improved weather going to cope with going to be with all the with the style of play. And they got thrown out the window.
I was going to say, Invercargill is the Riviera of the South, but probably in around about January or February. So it's probably theoretically still winter in September down in Invercargill. And I'll tell you what, there's some fantastic people down there as he backs the truck up a little bit.
The Riviera or just the river? I mean, just the river of the South.
Riviera of the South.
Guys, I have to say, yesterday, I was watching the game, and for me, the turning point was Jason Rutledge. Boy, when he came on, all of a sudden, Southland just they grew a couple of more inches up, and they really stage managed that last 10 minutes. They really showed a lot of ticker, a lot of heart. And great defensive effort, and the Magpies, they did have an opportunity right at the death. They did have a scrum, but they made the cardinal mistake of attacking pick and go on one direction and all of a sudden switching. They lost all momentum. There's a turnover, out into touch, upset of the round. Possibly might be ending up upset of the season.
Wow! Whoa, big statement there.
Well, I'll tell you what, the guy who sat beside me in the vehicle back is an absolute genius, because he actually picked Southland to win that game. So there you go, and that's true story, folk. He probably didn't put enough money on it though to get new equipment for New Zealand Sport Radio as he shakes his head. But
there's still 100 to 1. So don't forget that, guys. To win the Mitre 10, yeah.
Oh, to win the overall championship. Wow, yeah. That's odds probably been slashed in half. Where when Jason Rutledge ran on, the average age of Southland was probably 24. The average went out to 28 when he actually ran on the field. So, but in terms of what we listened to, it just sounded like a really gutsy defensive effort towards the end of the game. So, credit to them. Great way to start. Dale McLeod, who we've had on the show, is a really good guy and a very good coach as well, who's come through the system. I think it's Sydenham down in Christchurch he was originally with. So he's got a good, keen eye for good rugby players.
No, they are a much improved side. And Turner Wright says they've recruited well this season. They now, are they a side that's going to go on and win the championship and get promoted to the Premiership? No. No, they're not. But they're going to be a much tougher prospect than they have been for the past few years, where they've won. I think it's their second win in 3 years or something. So yes, it is. They're not. They're much improved. They're going to be harder to beat. They're not. Trying to suggest they're going to be championship contenders is wrong. As Aaron said, a great afternoon to be a hooker. All 4 tries were by hookers, 2 to each side. Well, so congratulations to them. Beers on the hookers last night, which you don't say very often in a bar. With that one, other games though, when they're in Harbour lost to Canterbury, we expected that one. Waikato beating Wellington by 53 points to 28. I mean, half century of points. The highest score in the round by Waikato against Wellington, semi-finalists last year, with a host of All Blacks and Super Rugby players available. That was a bit of an upset there. So you're talking about the Southland being an upset. I think that was a potentially a bigger upset there with that result, or the size of that result by Waikato over Wellington in dry conditions.
Well, Wellington have always struggled whenever they go up to travel up to play Waikato. So there's a little bit of history there. I haven't got the stats in front of me, but it was a very entertaining game. The ball was thrown around, and both sides, they really expressed themselves. What I was particularly impressed was that Waikato were able to beat up the Wellington counterparts up front. And I think that was all the difference. And of course, there was that try where Wellington went wide on the right wing. There was a pass which didn't go to hand. Damien McKenzie Johnny on the spot, thief in the night, gets the ball and absolutely smokes everyone. And that was just, simply fantastic to see. So, I guess the scoreline suggests a bit of a blowout, but for large parts of the game, both teams, they went blow for blow. It was punch counter punch. Waikato, they just had some class finishers on hand and 50 plus points. Interestingly, they took the penalty right at the death to make sure that they scored half century. So interesting.
Boa made an interesting point, Paul, because if that pass sticks, Wellington were right in the game. And if you watched all the Waikato team, it was almost like the whole team decided to run down to the goalpost to celebrate with Damien McKenzie. And you are so right. That was a real big moment. And I actually think that was a turning point. So well spotted.
Talking to whilst there are 19 interviews on the post-match interviews on the Facebook page, I did do 21 post-match interviews, we did. Sorry, Stephen did a couple as well there. Unfortunately, when I was interviewing Andrew Strawbridge, the Waikato head coach, I forgot to hit record. That one isn't available. But you're right. Well, he said something similar. He said, look, the scorecard might be a statement one, but the performance wasn't. The game was closer, was much more of a game than the scorecard suggests. I think he understands he's got a lot to work on there. Just so you all know, folks, the second interview that didn't get up there was my one with Kieran Reid, where I ran out of space on my phone storage. So yes, bit of a big one there that we didn't get. Never mind, folks. The Otago going to be beaten by Auckland. Obviously, the red card in that one. Yes, it's a red card, folks. I think there's much more to discuss apart from. Actually, no, we should discuss this one because you know what? We have a man who has a whole tackle framework to stop thing happening.
That was just, that was as ridiculous as it got. So the culprit, Sio Tomlinson, that was his third red card in about 375 days. Yeah, guys, at that level, and at that level of high performance, if you have someone who has a system, it's almost like it's symptomatic. He's got real bad technique. He leads in with his shoulder and he goes high. That needs to get sorted out. There's just no room in the modern game for that sort of stuff. Imagine, guys, getting a red card in the 81st minute of a game. How ridiculous is that? And of course, the victim of this whole thing, that was a nasty shot. I hope he's okay. I was messaging one of the Auckland coaches, Craig McGrath, just asking the question, is he all right? And fortunately, he is. Look, I've been working on a framework. It's called STF, Safe Tackle Framework. That's this little logo here, the man with the red head. So basically, what I've been trying to work on is create a tackle framework where people can engage in the game of rugby union, especially at the senior to elite level, in a safe but effective manner. So one of my key fundamental pillars, obviously safety, but one of the key visual guidelines, if you look at my jumper here, guys, I've got what I call a safe tackle line. It's called STL. So it's just on my sternum and on the side of my biceps. So one of my proposals, which I'm working with NZR as well as World Rugby at the moment, is to get the safe tackle line on training gear as well as game day on your match jersey. So what this means is there's a clear-cut guideline. When players make tackles, they have to stay south of the safe tackle line. So it's a very simple, very basic innovation. Of course, there's a whole raft of other suggestions as well, which includes an on-field orange card, because Rugby World Cup, even before we come, those sent me through a really good video explaining the piece and suggesting how you can get to learn more. So I'll put that up on the Facebook page, folks. One thing I do like about this is it means we're going to have hoops. Let's bring hoops back for rugby jerseys, because that's exactly what you get with these lines around. It gives us hoop jerseys, and then
All four hoop jerseys. Stephen, again, you're not. But then, we don't want to be taking fashion advice from Stephen. Let's just be clear here.
Oh dear! Just on the tackle, totally agree with Boa. Tompkinson actually had time to adjust his line. It wasn't as if it was a late reflex thing. Somebody's ducked in front of you, you've thrown out an arm. He decided to make that spot from a long way back, and he just got his body height in totally in the wrong place. So it's definitely a technique thing. Not only once he comes out of his suspension, and that could be a long one, somebody's got to sit down with this lad and do a little bit of work. Maybe a guy called Boa Athu can.
Absolutely. Look, he's got to come up to Auckland, STF school 2 weeks. I'll teach this boy actually how to bend his knees, look up with your eyes, and actually get into what I would call a safe position and execute a safe tackle. And of course, guys, with this framework, what I'm trying to actually achieve is with the current guidelines with World Rugby, with the tackle height framework, more likely than not, you will see more red cards because the margin of error is a lot lesser and it's very less forgiving. And of course, one key stakeholder in the firing line is the referee. So by having an on-field orange cards, we're actually trying to mitigate having to issue red cards. So it's not going to be fatal. You're not going to see a team being reduced to 14 men for large portions of the game. And of course, by having an on-field orange card, it means it's a mandatory judiciary 48 hours after the game.
We'll agree to disagree on this one because I'm overcomplicating, adding more cards and more laws isn't the way I would like to go personally. But anyway, we'll moving on from the tackle. Then we all agree. Look, Sia Tompkinson's going to have a nice big ban.
10 games. Actually, Owen Farrell. They're in the same club. They should be rooming together. They should be coming up.
I was going to say, if anybody who's watching a game at home and you see a high tackle, the thing to look for is where the tackler is looking. If his head is down, he's actually not looking at where his contact is going to be. And that was the telling factor when we saw the action replay. His head was down. So he was never in a position to actually hit the carrier in a safe position. End of story.
And it's interesting that's actually something that in the NFL they really do teach is head up and looking the whole time. Now NFL have done some bad things around tackle technique. Let's be blunt, but that's one of the good things. Yeah, they do teach. And some rugby players do struggle with that when they when they've been trying to make transitions over there. So after that, County Manukau losing to Tasman 24-41, pretty much expected. Northland beating Manawatu 43-26. I predicted Northland in this one, but only 38% of people predicted Northland on the old Super Brew. So suggesting that was a bit of an upset as well. Stephen, do you think that was a bit of an upset, or do you think that was the expected result?
Well, I think the concerning thing for Northland, unlike Manawatu, who had played a preseason game against Wellington the week before, Northland had played an internal game, but from what I understood, they ended up banging up about 2 or 3 of their players. So I don't know if it did a lot of good. And that first 20 minutes, quite frankly, they looked like they just played an internal trial game before they finally got it together. One thing about Northern, once they actually got ball in hand and they play their style of rugby, which is a little bit loose, but it can be broken play stuff, as seen in a lot of their tries. Boy, they can punish you.
So that's the Taranaki beat Bay of Plenty. I went for Bay of Plenty there. So but 71% people went with Taranaki, so that wasn't an upset. And congratulations on Taranaki for winning the Chiefs Cup off Bay of Plenty for that one. Any comments before we get to because then I was going to wrap up the.
What you go, boy?
Yeah, look, Bay of Plenty, I thought they kicked a lot of ball away, and especially when you had the two Barrett brothers, waiting to receive the gifts. That was very, very charitable. And I thought, that's really poor tactics. They should have really, kept ball in hand. And look to force play by way of the forward. So I was very, very surprised to see the amount of kicking Bay of Plenty did, and paid the price.
Oh, very much so. The interesting stat about that game, probably the smallest venue of all the Mitre 10 Cup venues had the biggest crowd. How ironic was that? Because obviously people were just standing, it was fenced around, and the locals just basically turned up, and you could hear the noise coming through the television. I caught up with the highlights last night, and it definitely was the biggest crowd.
Yes, they're not playing in their normal venue because of the earthquake issues with that one and it being rebuilt, and hence they're in a different venue. And then finally, Southland versus Hawke's Bay, which I think we've talked about pretty much already. The biggest upset, only 90% of people picked that one, but I did. So, folks, tomorrow I'll be putting out my predictions for round 2 of the Mitre 10 Cup, round 3 of the Farah Palmer Cup, the top 14, the Gallagher Premiership, and whatever other rugby is on, to be honest with you. So yes, that's the that's where we'll be with that one. The good point, yeah, there is no offside line behind the try line. So yes, there were a couple of times when referees this weekend had to have a quick think of what is the law here, such as there was one at half time in the Northland versus gone blank, Northland versus Manor 2, where there's a penalty where he kicks to the corner, kicks to the sideline, it bounces and goes out. And they're kind of like, oh, hang on, does that mean he gets we do the line out or we don't? So there are a couple of quick checks there that referees had to quickly remind themselves as to what the laws were. But hey, it's their first time back at this level as well, so let's forgive them a couple here and there.
Well, we used to have a Minty's moment of the hard case moment of the rugby weekend. We probably should bring that back. Because it was seriously hard case, because I think wise guy Fayani, I think he's found about a whole 10 metres, because I think he was trying to find touch from halfway, kicking towards the far side of Semenov Stadium, which is into a southerly, and it actually just bounced over the 10-metre line and into touch. And if Manawatu were onto it, they could have just caught it, kicked it into touch, and gone a half time at 20-17 up, as opposed to 22-20 down. So it was probably close to my Minty's moment of the weekend, guys.
Well, I don't know where you're getting Minty. We used to have a Mickey Mouse moment of the week. That was our on the show. You're thinking of a different
I'm looking for a sponsor here, Paul.
Oh, okay.
Work with me.
Hey, Disney could be our sponsor. That'd be brilliant. Look, talking of American big media companies, did you see that Amazon have bought the rights to the Autumn Nations Cup. I think they're calling it, which is the 8-team tournament up in Europe, which involves the Six Nations tournaments plus Georgia and Fiji. That's going to be over on Amazon, which is going to be interesting to see. Amazon, remember, they did a All Blacks documentary a couple of years ago. So clearly they're slowly dipping their water into the whole into sports media side of things. It's going to be interesting to see how that progresses over the future years, because apparently New Zealand Rugby is going to have to renegotiate its TV deal with Sky. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Will they still get a share of Sky? Will they still own Sky or own a small part of Sky as part of that, or will something else happen? We'll have to wait and see how that one is. My understanding is Amazon only have the rights to the UK. So I would expect. Let's be honest. Sports rights sales and distribution are archaic, archaic. Yeah, and so it's going to take time for people to have global, or for a company to have global rights. So yes, Amazon only have it for one country currently, but I think they're dipping their toe in and figuring out how to do it. So we'll see. We'll see how that. Yes, I expect. Yeah, this year they will be on Sky, in New Zealand. You're quite right there, Simon, which is good because I've got Sky and I don't have Amazon Prime. It's all about me, remember, folks. I'll show you how it's all about me because I'll just go on the screen. Yeah, it's all about me. Not about those other two guys in the show. So we should also, the other thing that's happened also is we've had off-field spats between New Zealand rugby and Australian rugby around this side of things. We often remember we've had a CEO change at New Zealand rugby, and since then New Zealand rugby seems to have managed to upset everyone else around the world in administration circles with the way they've been acting. So taking a much more aggressive line in that. I don't know if Stephen or Bo, you want to have a comment on sort of how New Zealand rugby seems to have approached international relations over the last, since the turn of the year. But to me, they do seem to have taken a much more aggressive approach to it. I mean, criticising World Rugby or criticising all the other unions for voting back in Bill Beaumont is an interesting move. For example, reaching out to Australian franchises and saying, "Hey, who would like to come play in our tournament?" Oh, by the way, we're not talking to Australian rugby. We're asking the teams directly, and then saying, the latest one is you've got to come out of quarantine and play 2 days later against us in a test match. Anyway, up to you guys if you would like to comment or not on the way that New Zealand rugby have been taking diplomacy, this lessons.
I saw Steve pointing at me, so yeah, I'll take the lead. Well, look, interesting times. I actually don't mind the aggression at all because with this whole safe tackle framework thing, I have been in constant touch with Mark Robinson, a very savvy guy. He knows what he's doing, and I think he's just trying to get the best possible deal for NZR and New Zealand rugby as a whole. So if that means you're going to have to rattle a few cages and ruffle a few feathers, so be it. It's nothing personal. It's all business. And also maybe, this is a bit of a paradigm shift we're seeing because if you look at what's happening in Europe, especially with the club scene, it's a common occurrence where clubs don't release players and they have this very standoffish situation between the RFU and the clubs. We don't actually see that level of cage rattling here in New Zealand. Everything is, in sync and in harmony. So this, to me, this is a bit of a change, a paradigm shift. And I think what NZR are doing is they're trying to make sure that they're looking after their best interests, i.e. that all filters right down. And given that the showpiece is the professional segment of their rugby, which is, the All Blacks Super Rugby, and given that, COVID-19 has just come along, press the reset button to a certain degree, they're just sort of trying to create a little bit of monopoly for themselves. And, that's not such a bad thing. Only time will tell. So wait and see.
Time will tell. Yes, absolutely. I think I'll Aaron's further. Yes, it's time New Zealand rugby stood up and took a strong stance. I think there's taking a strong stance and taking a proactive stance, and then there's also taking a antagonistic or a stance. And I think, from my point of view, and it's a personal one. This does not necessarily reflect Stephen or Boa's view. I think they may have stepped over into the antagonising side and gone a bit too far. I do, yeah. Clearly, they have to take a strong stance and look after New Zealand, the New Zealand rugby. But I think we also need to remember that New Zealand rugby will be strong if all rugby is strong. That you grow as a group, you don't grow. I think you need teams to play and people to play against. Personally, Stephen, you're mowing on over.
Interesting. Somewhere in there, and lies the answer. My only issue with World Rugby, I look at anybody, one of those organisations, as a guardian, and as a guardian, it's basically up to them to ensure that they look after. It's like your children. You don't look after half a dozen and don't worry about the rest. And that's my issue with World Rugby. They don't cover or look after or Manaki for want of a Maori word, which means basically look after all their so-called children, and they seem to pick and choose. And what they've done with their voting regime is given a lot of unions or international countries more rights than what they actually should have. So, to be brutally honest, I have no issues with what you're saying if World Rugby has got their own house in order. And I think with New Zealand, there's a bit of a sense of frustration because what's that saying? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Those are my thoughts.
Actually, yes. Okay, sorry. I badly phrased it. When I meant growing World Rugby, I didn't mean growing the organisation itself. I meant growing the rugby family as a whole, rather than necessarily that entity. There is what I mean. I think you need to. What I mean is you can't try and just look after rugby just in New Zealand. We need to help Japan step up and work with them. We need to help Australia step up and work with them. We need the Pacific Islands try and grow them all.
Well,
together we can grow together. I guess is where I meant, rather than necessarily World Rugby itself.
There's something that they can change at the drop of a hat, in my opinion, and that's the eligibility rule. But they have let some unions rough ride over that rule because they're scared. They're scared of their own well-being. So you create a division that that doesn't cost a lot of money. That's just a governance thing. It's easy enough to change. We've seen what rugby league has done by okay, there's a little bit over the top movement. Some guys play for 1 year, but isn't it fantastic to see in the league code somebody like Tonga come to the fore, to the point they were able to beat the top guys. I don't know if we'll see that in rugby. I want to see Pacific Island teams knock over in New Zealand and Australia, South Africa. But it ain't going to happen.
Not in the current situation. No, you're quite right. And again, yes, I agree with you on that. That we do need to change the eligibility, but I think it's I would change it to where you've got less than 10 caps you can move, and you can move once. I don't think we don't want people sort of playing for New Zealand this year, playing for Samoa next year, coming back and playing for New Zealand again because I've now got an All Blacks thing. So yeah, I agree. Yeah, loosen up the eligibility, but don't go full hog and make it totally loose.
That'll change because what we want, like any competition, and Boa knows coming from the Auckland Club competition, we want every team to be competitive on the same level, and that's and a compliance or governance thing like that is easy to do, and that's what I can't get my head round. You want to have a world tournament that showcases all these countries and the best teams, and you want a little guy to come through. I want a little guy to come through.
One thing I have to say is, speaking of looking after your own interest. Now, if you look at the championship, the rugby championship, South Africa are threatening to not participate because they feel that they are underprepared and they haven't had much top flight rugby. So, online, if you have a look at some of the popular forums and sites, there's a lot of banter brewing amongst the fans, and South Africans are being accused of dodging having to play the best side in the world, the All Blacks, and they promptly revert to their stance, saying, "Hey, we're the current world champions, guys, for the next 4 years." So there's all that sort of stuff in the back play as well, and the point I'm trying to make is, and even if you look at how Australia and Dave Rennie have come back and said, no, we're not agreeing to these quarantine terms. All they're trying to do is, look after their own interests, and I completely understand that. And the point which Steve made, where giving the little guys a chance from a compliance point of view. Now, if you look at all the major countries, the major unions, where you have naturalized players who go on to represent their representative sites, from looking after the smaller guys, maybe going forward, some of the bigger unions might want to actually financially contribute to the Pacific Island nations, because essentially what they are doing is helping the islands create better players so that eventually, when they become so good, they can walk into their side and play representative rugby. So there's all sorts of things happening in the background, which is actually holding this back, i.e., hindering the growth of these smaller unions. And I sometimes actually question myself: equality and equity, is this all lip service, or do they actually want to do this?
Boa, interestingly enough, if, for example, you got a Samoa or a Tonga really strong to the point that they were in the top 3 or 4, how many kids playing in New Zealand of Samoan, Tongan descent would all of a sudden think it would be fashionable to play for their country of origin? I'll tell you, they would go in their droves. It'll be to New Zealand rugby's detriment. That simple as that, because these kids will want to play. But we are already seeing that in rugby league, where Tongan boys that are playing in the NRL want to play for Tonga. They don't want to play for the Kiwis.
And look, it's a couple of comments in the live chat there about, Charles Pierce did have an opportunity to change and get himself qualified for Tonga if he wanted to. But finance, money definitely came into that one. Aaron says that it's nice thought that you want everyone to be equal, but not realistic. It's not realistic, but you can at least aim for it. You're never going to achieve it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be trying to level the playing field. Now, when I say criticize New Zealand Rugby's approach over the last the last sort of 8 months or so, that doesn't mean to say that I think other unions are perfect. No, I don't think. I'm not sure there is a union that is doing a good job at the moment, to be honest with you. I think all of them have big room for improvement, and could be doing things better. And I think we do see a lot of too much self-interest in the game across all of the unions. To be honest, I think one of the things we do need to remember is that the World Rugby as an entity itself can't unilaterally do things. It suggests things and then all the unions vote. Now, admittedly, the Six Nations, because there's 6 of them getting 3 votes each, and there's only 4 rugby championship teams getting 3 votes each, it is definitely weighted in the European. To say Northern Hemisphere is wrong, but in the European favour as to what World Rugby does. So sometimes we need to be careful about trying to blame World Rugby when actually it's the collective unions voting that's the issue, rather than World Rugby itself. World Rugby can only do what its members vote to allow it to do at the end of the day. Hence why we've got Bill Bowman back rather than Pichot on that one.
Yeah, guys, it's a bit of a shame, I have to say. Had Pichot been the president, safe tackle framework would have been rolled out in a heartbeat, because I had a lot of communication with him. He's someone who was really open to innovation, and he really wanted to shake the apple cart. But I think there was a lot of pushback, and as you rightly pointed out, most of the nations who voted against, and it was a close call. But that's a very political sort of thing, and in every major organization where there's lots of money involved, it's part and parcel. One thing I do have to say, Paul, is last 8 months, and based on how NZ Rugby have been calling the shots, we have to understand rugby on a global scale. New Zealand has been the most active country, mostly because compared to the rest of the world, the whole thing with getting COVID-19 under control we've had relatively good success. And of course, with the layoff and fans seeing how good Super Rugby Aotearoa was, they just wanted more and more. And I think New Zealand Rugby felt like they had a perfect product which they could go on sell and market. And they must have felt like they could grow a commercial arm and a leg just almost overnight. And I think some of the decisions which we're seeing, and some of the policy and some of the calls they're trying to make, is probably based on that commercial. What's the choice of word I need to be using here so that I don't cause too much controversy? Commercial strength, perhaps.
And I don't want to delve in too far into into politics here, but I want to say, the world has been grown on social classes, and what we're suggesting is socialism or true communism. No, we're not. What we're trying to say here is you can only have a business. Your business will grow if you have a competitive product to sell. You can only have a competitive product to sell if you've got competitive people to play against. If you just look after yourself and don't look after a bit like if you look at NRL, one of the things that they say is they compete on the pitch, they collaborate off the pitch. It's about collaboration, not necessarily pure equalism. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about in that side of things. Should we have a quick chat about the Wallabies squad on the assumption they might get over here?
Why not?
Let's bring up the Wallabies squad here. Now, big thank you to Rugby Reg on Twitter, who has split out the Wallabies squad for us into positions, which I find very much very helpful to lay things out like this. Now, one of the things is if you're going to pick 40 odd players, it's a bit difficult to say who did he leave out when he's got 5 teams to pick from. But I think Nazarani is the number 8. Is probably the only what is probably the big name that's missed out. But if we look at this, and I think he might need some injury replacements because Haylett Petty hobbled off during the semi-finals. So Banks, Haylett Petty, Maddox at the back there. Dongunu's been having a particularly good season. Corabetti, unsurprisingly there. And Ram and Wright, the Hodge, Palasami, Pataya in there. A bit surprised to see Simone in there, to be honest. But and Ikatua, Harrison, Loliseo, O'Connor, Tamua. He's basically picked all the fly halves there. Loliseo, we have to see whether he's come back from injury or not. Good to see some players from the Western Force in there. I think was Wilson one of the ones from Western? Actually, maybe not.
No, Wilson is Reds.
Reds, yeah, sorry. Is in there. Still an issue at lock. I think Hannigan's more a blind side than a lock, really. And there's talk that he's allowed to add 2 overseas players in here. And they think that lock might be one of those areas. But otherwise, looks like I think he's picked pretty much everyone that was available. Any thoughts on the squad, Boa?
Yeah, look, I have to say, Hunter Paisami, former Manuka Rovers boy, moved over to Australia, living his dream. So I'm so happy for him. Congratulations on making the Wallaby squad. But I look at this squad, and I have to say, guys, it's a bit of a mismatch if they come up against the All Blacks. There are guys in here, they won't even make the 4th best squad representing New Zealand. And to me, this, it's just going to be a mismatch, right, all the way through. Now, there is talk of the All Blacks not fielding the stronger side because of family commitments, etc. Be that as it may, I think the All Blacks have enough depth and talent, given that if they train long enough together, they're just going to completely destroy this Wallaby side in whatever form or shape they come up against. So good luck to Dave Rennie. Lovely guy, great coach, enormous amount of respect for him. But, all that swagger coming from across the Tasman, wanting to call the shots. All I have to say is good luck to you guys, because you know what? You're going to need it big time.
Stephen?
Yeah, interesting thoughts there, Boa. They've definitely gone for a lot of youth. I look at the squad and I look at what I term a 2022, 2023 team that should be about right at its peak. If some of these, and that's a question mark, if some of these young guys can come through. I'm really excited about Dalguni, who's a really, really good winger. Obviously, Jordan Pataya and Paisami. Those guys are actually genuine line breakers. But I think right at this moment, Boa, I think you'd have to. I'd agree with you. I think the All Blacks would own them right now. Put it that way. I think I probably look at them being in contact for probably 45 to 60 minutes, and probably the All Blacks with their talent would probably their talent, depth, strength would probably be too good. There's some, no question. There's a couple of world class players that are in the side, and guys with a lot of ability to go on and become very, very good international players. I mean to say, I've seen a lot of improvement in Fili Samu and Harry Wilson, the number 8's a very, very good footballer. But then again, they've also got the likes of Simmons, who's played over 100 games, and to be brutally honest, he's the sort of guy I don't think he would have got anywhere near an All Black squad if he'd been in New Zealand. He's been around that scene for a long time, and the fact that he's played 100 games has probably said more about what sort of depth that they've got in the Wallabies. Excuse me, at the minute. But I am quite excited about some of their younger guys in the team as well. I really do like Tate McDermott, but the halfback, he's very good. But then you've got guys like Nick White, Powell, have all been around for a while. And if I was picking two halfbacks that I quite like from that scrum, from that team, I'd be more likely to go for Gordon and McDermott. Really guys who can really, really run well and ask a lot of questions.
I gotta say, guys, in this side, to me, I'm only seeing two genuine world class guys who can actually foot it man to man against an All Black 15, and that's Taniela Tupou and Marika Korobiti. Everyone else, largely unproven, and guys like Hannigan, I wouldn't even have them in a Mitre 10 side because one of the key stats where when you compare Super Rugby Aotearoa against Super Rugby Australia was the ball live in play on average. Games in New Zealand were about 3 minutes 11 seconds more ball being live in play. Now that's a tremendous amount of rugby. And also, if you look at the average score differentials, we're looking at about a 14-point spread across the Tasman. So that tells you that there was genuine competition. And also, when you're seeing guys like Lachlan Boucher miss out on being picked to a wider squad, I mean, doesn't that tell you something about the talent?
Okay. So undeniably, New Zealand has got much better depth than Australia currently. That's undeniable. Okay, so definitely. Now, but I think to suggest Hannigan wouldn't make a Mitre 10 Cup side is harsh on Hannigan. Do I think he is a international class lock? No, I don't. But he is. But decent Super Rugby 6, yes, decent, but not an international player. Yes, they don't have the depth here. They're a couple of injuries away from being in real trouble. But as a match day 15, a starting 15, they'll have a decent starting 15. Are there a bunch of players in here who are green and young? Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we've been saying about Australia is they've got talent coming through, and what that means is you're going to have to blood it sooner or later, right? They've made the final of the Junior Rugby World Cup last year. They've beaten the New Zealand schoolboys and under 20s the past couple of seasons as well. So they've got talent coming through. A lot of it is very young. Pataya, really Adongunu. Yeah, they're showing potential and they could be really good. And I think, so I think they'll have a decent 15. They'll at 23. Will they match the All Blacks? No, they won't. But I think they're a better side than perhaps you're giving them credit for, Bella.
Well, what I'd love to see is this same Wallabies squad go up against a shadow All Black 15, where we leave all the top guys out. And I think this year, given that we're coming out of COVID, it's probably worth an experiment. And that will probably see a more even competition as well. But if right now, based on the current run-on form after Super Rugby Aotearoa and also the build-up from Mitre 10 NPC. If the All Blacks stay together in camp, they train together, they're just going to go obliterate this side. I think it's going to be hiding after hiding, and I'm quite confident to call it as I see that.
That's just for you. Absolutely, you can. I'm more on Stephen's side here that they'll be competitive for around about the hour mark, perhaps slightly less, and then they'll disappear. Sure, there might be. They're talking about playing 4 Bledisloe Cup games, and yes, there'll probably be one where they totally where they let it where it does get out of hand early. But I think in most in 3 out of 4, they should be competitive for the first hour of each game before losing them. Probably they may be losing them by 30, 40 points by the end, but I think it'll be the last 20 minutes where it blows out rather than necessarily being a drubbing from the start in most of the games.
Paul, I was going to say pre-COVID at the top of the year, probably the most impressive side, or the side that always impressed me, were the Reds. They actually play a really good style. I mean to say, I know the Brumbies are considered the top side, but really and truthfully, I think you need a little bit more than a line out maul and drive to score your points. They're obviously very, very good at it. But if you come up against much more skilled sides, I think your game plan is going to get found out. But I do like the way the Reds, or the style they look to play. It's a little bit more open compared to the Australian sides, and I think more importantly, Dave Rennie has to find a style that suits these guys that he's bringing through. Because if they take the mechanical approach, I personally think they'll get done. One advantage that they've got on their side, the Wallabies, at least they haven't got Checker. He's no longer in the camp. I actually think he was quite a divisive force when he was in the camp, and having Dave Rennie there, a guy who's is a cool, calm character. I think it will basically help the Wallabies moving forward. Hopefully, we want to see a good Wallaby team.
Yep. Talking about All Blacks staying home. From what I've heard, there's only 2 that so far have been rumoured as potentially staying home. And don't forget that the first 2 Bledisloe Cup games are in New Zealand anyway, so they would be available for those ones. They wouldn't be missing from those ones. So we're talking about the first 2. We did expect it to be a full All Blacks selection for that one. Well, folks, that's our hour up. Thank you very much, Boa, for joining us yet again. And don't forget, folks, do look out on the New Zealand Sports Radio Facebook page, because I'll be posting the video up about that safe tackle framework. So thank you very much for joining us.
Very welcome, guys.
And Stephen, thank you. Good to see you again after our 10-hour road trip up to Northland yesterday. I'm nearly forgetting who you were.
Kia ora no Paul. Hei a popo a Boa. Ka kite anō a tērā wiki.
Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to join us at 8 p.m. next Monday for the DrivingMaul show.